The morning sun filtered through the plane tree leaves and fell onto the central garden of Veterans Green. Jade Carter was kneeling on a large checkered blanket, organizing her supplies. 28-year-old Jade had a warm, open face that inspired trust in children. Her natural hair was pulled back into a practical bun, and her yellow Stone Ridge Elementary School art department t-shirt was already splattered with paint, even though the project hadn't officially started yet. "Miss Carter, can I use the blue paint first?" a small voice asked. Jade looked up and saw 8-year-old Emma Martinez standing beside her, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Behind her, a dozen more children had gathered with their parents. "Everyone can use whatever color they want," Jade replied. "But remember what we talked about. Wait for each layer to dry before adding the next one, okay?" Emma said. She sat down on the blanket. Jade looked at the growing group with satisfaction. She had spent 2 months organizing this event, working with the Parks Department to obtain the necessary permits, coordinating with local hardware stores for supplies, and preparing age-appropriate instruction guides. Jade Carter, still a birdhouse trying to save the world. The familiar voice made Jade smile even before she turned around. Mrs. Louise Thompson sat on her usual bench next to the maple tree. The 72-year-old retired teacher had been an indispensable part of Veterans Green for 40 years. "Mrs. Wheezy," Jade went over and hugged the old woman gently. "I was hoping you'd be here," she replied. Jade loved the old woman very much. "I wouldn't miss it for the world. Your brother stopped by last week and told me about this project." "Speaking of Marcus, is he coming too?" she asked, because she loved him dearly too. "He said he'd stop by for coffee before taking care of his business. You know him, he can't relax even on his day off," Jade replied. Miss Wheezy smiled knowingly. "That boy was the same in my class, always trying to fix everything, making sure everyone followed the rules." She took a small notebook out of her bag. "Now he's the police chief." "Imagine that," she replied. "Acting chief," Jade corrected. "The appointment isn't permanent yet." "But yes, my brother finally got the chance to reorganize the department the way he's wanted for years," she said. Jade felt a sense of pride toward her brother. More family arrived and spread blankets on the grass. Jade recognized a few parents from school and community members she had gathered through social media and neighborhood groups. This diversity was intentional. "All right, everyone," Jade clapped her hands to get everyone's attention. "Thank you all for coming to our first Community Beautification Saturday event. We're going to paint these birdhouses, let them dry, and place them around the park next week. Our goal is to beautify Veterans Green while creating nests for the local bird population," she said. She held up an instruction sheet. "Parents, you can help the little ones, but let them take the lead. This is about creativity and ownership. There's no wrong way to paint a birdhouse," she continued. Jade loved children too. As families settled in, the park filled with the pleasant sounds of children chatting, brushes clinking in paint pots, and occasional laughter. Jade wandered around. "Your color choice is beautiful, David," she said to the 10-year-old boy who had chosen bright purple for his roof. "That's a very bold choice," she encouraged David. The boy smiled. "My mom says purple is the royal color," he replied. "Your mom is right. This will be a palace for very lucky birds," Jade said. 30 minutes into the project, a dark pickup truck pulled up to the curb. Jade recognized her brother's vehicle and felt a warmth in her chest. Marcus Carter arrived with 2 coffee cups and dressed casually. "Hey champ," Marcus said, using the nickname from his childhood. He was 10 years older, and after their parents died when Jade was 16, he had practically raised her. His protective instincts hadn't diminished. "Marcus," Jade said, gratefully accepting the coffee. "You saved my life. I've been preparing here since 7 o'clock, she said. Various families, children focused on their art, a peaceful atmosphere. He surveyed the scene with obvious pleasure. "This is beautiful, Jade. Really, the community needed something like this," Marcus replied. They walked over to where Miss Wheezy was sitting, and Marcus leaned down and kissed her cheek. "Miss Wheezy, you look beautiful as always," he said. "Marcus Carter, I taught you not to lie," she replied, but her eyes sparkled with affection. "How's your new job going?" she asked gently. "Like trying to turn an aircraft carrier with a canoe paddle," Marcus admitted, sitting down on the grass next to Jade. "There's a lot of resistance to change, but we're making progress," he said. "I heard about the new body camera protocols," said Miss Wheezy. "Some officers were very pleased when the cameras malfunctioned during complaint incidents." Marcus's voice was sharp. "Those days are over. Every camera now has a full audit trail. There are no more convenient technical malfunctions," he said. Jade squeezed his arm. "I'm proud of you. I know it's not easy, especially with the union resisting," she said, showing her support for Marcus. "The union protects bad cops more than good ones," he said. Marcus checked his watch. "I've got a few things to do, but I'll be back in a couple of hours." "Do you need anything?" he asked. "We're fine." "Enjoying the morning," Jade replied. After Marcus left, Jade returned to supervising the children. All the children were happily accomplishing something. "Mrs. Carter, look," said a young black boy named Terrell, holding up a birdhouse painted in vibrant red and yellow. "It's like sunset," he exclaimed. "That's wonderful, Terrell. The birds will love it," Mrs. Carter replied. The morning was peaceful. Suddenly, the atmosphere changed. At first, it was a very subtle change. Jade sensed a shift in energy before she consciously noticed it. Some parents stopped mid-sentence. A few people looked toward the parking lot with a mixture of concern and another emotion. Jade followed their gaze and saw a Stone Ridge Police Department patrol car pull up to the curb. The car sat there for a long time with the engine running. Then the driver's door opened. Officer Brent Kesler stepped out as if he owned the place. 40 years old, solidly built but with a softened waistline, Kesler wore his uniform with a relaxed authority that suggested he'd never been seriously questioned. His mirrored sunglasses hid his eyes, and he was examining the parking lot. Jade felt a tightening in her stomach, but pushed the feeling aside. They had permission. He had permission. There was no reason to worry. Kesler began walking toward them with deliberate slowness, his boots crunching on the gravel path in a deliberately intimidating rhythm. A few parents instinctively pulled their children closer. Others, as if Officer Kesler's peaceful activities had never been interrupted before, began gathering their materials with customary efficiency. "Everyone stay calm," Jade said quietly, projecting a confidence she didn't entirely feel. "All our paperwork is in order." Mrs. Wheezy dropped her knitting, carefully folding her hands in her lap. But Jade noticed the old woman's notebook was now open on the bench beside her, her pen poised. She was taking notes. She was bearing witness. Kesler stood at the edge of the blanket, his shadow falling over the carefully arranged materials. He stood there silently for a long time, his presence looming over the group like a threat. "Who approved this?" His voice was flat, carrying a false politeness that any adult could perceive as hostile. Jade stood up calmly, keeping her body language open and non-threatening. "Officer, I'm Jade Carter. This is a community art project, approved and authorized by the Parks Department. Would you like to see my paperwork? I want to know whose idea it was to run an art and crafts program in the ghetto on city property without proper authorization." His words landed like a slap. Several parents held their breath. The children, though they didn't understand the specific insult, sensed the adult's tension and fell silent. Jade felt a warmth in her face but kept her voice steady. "As I said, officer, we have full authority. Let me show you the permit." Slowly, careful that his movements were not visible or threatening, he walked over to his supply bag and pulled out a folder containing the permit he had obtained from the Parks Department, insurance documents, and the approved event plan. Kesler didn't even look at the documents. "You always find an excuse, don't you? You think the rules don't apply to you, Officer Kesler." Mrs. Wheezy's voice, with decades of classroom authority, sharply broke the tension. "Jade has all the necessary permits. I've been here since she arrived this morning. Everything is completely legal." Kesler's attention shifted to the elderly woman, and a nasty expression appeared on his face. "Ma'am, if you don't want to be arrested for obstruction, I suggest you stay out of police business. Are you threatening me?" Miss Wheezy's voice remained calm, but her pen was now scribbling every word in her notebook. "I'm telling you to mind your own business." Kesler turned to Jade, approached her, and deliberately invaded her personal space. "Pick up this trash. You're disturbing the peace." "We're not disturbing anyone," Jade replied, taking pride in the fact that her voice didn't tremble despite her heart racing. "The children are learning about wildlife conservation and community pride. Everything we're doing is educational and beneficial. Are you arguing with a police officer?" Kesler's voice rose and echoed through the suddenly quiet park. "Because if you don't keep your mouth shut, I can really difficult." A few parents pulled out their phones and started recording. Jade was aware of this but kept her attention on Kesler, reading the aggression in his body language, the movement of his hand toward his belt. Not exactly threatening, but reminding everyone present of his authority, his weapons, his power. "I'm not arguing," Jade said carefully. "I'm showing you we have permission to be here." She held out the folder again. Kesler snatched it from her hand, and for a moment Jade thought he was actually going to examine it. Instead, he opened the folder, pulled out the carefully prepared permission slip, and tore it in half. "You no longer have permission," he said with a cold, triumphant smile. "Pack your things and get these kids out of here, or I'll start charging every adult with trespassing and disturbing the peace." "You can't," Jade began. "Can't do what?" Kesler moved closer, so close Jade could smell the coffee on his breath and see her own reflection in his mirrored sunglasses. "Are you telling me what I can't do? Are you explaining to me how the law works?" His voice rose almost to a shout, and a few small children began to cry. Parents gathered their children, some looking at Jade with sympathy, others with barely concealed expressions of "I told you so," implying this was not unexpected. "Everyone stay," Jade said, cutting through the chaos with a teacher's voice. She looked at the parents. "We have permission to be here. Officer Kesler revoking my permit doesn't change that fact. The Parks Department has copies on file." "Listen to her," said Kesler, his tone dismissive. "You think you're so smart, don't you? All," he said, making a dismissive gesture toward the group of different families. Whatever you are, you think you can come and take over a public park as if it belongs to you. This is a public park, Jade replied, her anger finally breaking through her practiced calm. That means it belongs to everyone, not just those you deem worthy. The words poured out before she could stop them. She saw Kesler's face turn dark red, his hands clenching into fists. Enough, he said. You've just earned yourselves a citation for disorderly conduct, and if you're not gone in 5 minutes, everyone here will get a trespassing citation. We have permission. Jade tried to control herself, but her voice rose. You just— 5 minutes, Kesler shouted, and several children screamed, or I'll start making arrests. The parents sprang into action, gathering their belongings and ushering their children away. Some seemed apologetic, most seemed resigned, as if they knew this was bound to happen eventually. Jade froze, watching her carefully planned project descend into chaos, suddenly feeling powerless, humiliated, and angry. Miss Wheezy came over, placing her worn hand on Jade's arm. Honey, let's pull ourselves together for now. This isn't over, but right now we need to protect the children. Jade looked at the old woman's face and saw a steely determination beneath her gentle expression. She saw that the notebook in her other hand was filled with neat handwriting. She saw that the phones were still recording from various angles. Jade called out in a trembling yet clear voice, Everyone, please gather yourselves carefully. Take your birdhouses home. We will finish this project, I promise. Just not today. As families dispersed, gathering their materials and comforting their crying children, Kes stood with his arms crossed, a cold smile never leaving his face. He had won, and he knew it. Jade began folding the large blanket with trembling hands, suppressed anger coursing through her. 30 minutes ago, the park had been filled with joy, creativity, and community spirit. Now it felt poisoned, tainted by ordinary cruelty and racist abuse of authority. I'll be watching you, Kesler said quietly as he passed by. If you try this again, I'll make sure you regret it. Then he left, his boots crunching on the gravel as he returned to his truck. He sat there for another 5 minutes, the engine running, making sure everyone knew he was observing them, documenting, establishing dominance. When the truck finally drove away, Jade slowly sat down on the grass, surrounded by discarded materials and half-finished birdhouses. Her beautiful project, her attempt to bring the community together, had been destroyed in minutes by a police officer with his badge and his hatred, which he didn't even try to hide. Miss Wheezy, still clutching her notebook, sat down beside her. 17 times, the old woman said softly. What? 17 times, in the last 5 years, I documented Officer Kesler harassing people of color in this park. Different families, different situations, same pattern, allegations of unauthorized activity, aggressive confrontation, forcing people to leave. She tapped her notebook lightly. Dates, times, explanations. I was waiting for someone willing to stand up to him. Jade looked at the scattered materials, the frightened families, the project that had once been so important and was now in ruins. I won't give up the fight, she said quietly. It's not even over yet. In the parking lot, a familiar dark pickup truck pulled up. Marcus Carter got out, coffee cups in hand, his relaxed weekend expression turning to professional concern when he saw the scene. The scattered families, his sister's devastated face, the hastily gathered paint supplies. Jade? He hurried toward her. What happened? Where is everyone going? Jade looked at her brother, the new police chief, the reformer, the man who had just told her he was trying to change a broken system. We need to talk, she said, about Officer Brent Kesler, and how your department protected him while he terrorized people like us. The peaceful Saturday morning was shattered, but as Marcus helped gather the supplies and Mrs. Wheezy wrote her final notes in her notebook, Jade felt something become clear inside her. Officer Kesler had made a terrible mistake. He had harassed the wrong person, and he had done it while cameras recorded it, witnesses documented it, and the new police chief's sister watched a community project get destroyed by the kind of corruption her brother had sworn to end. The fight had only just begun. The road to Marcus's house was quiet except for the steady click of Miss Wheezy's knitting needles in the back seat. Jade looked out the passenger window, watching the suburban streets of Stone Ridge pass by. Neat houses with manicured lawns, children playing in driveways, the picture of peaceful community life that seemed like a lie after what had just happened. Marcus pulled into the driveway and turned off the engine. For a long time, no one moved. Inside, he said finally, his voice carrying the controlled tone Jade recognized from her childhood, meaning her brother was angry but channeling his anger into focus. We need to do this properly. We need to document everything while it's fresh. His home office reflected the orderly mind of someone who had spent 15 years in law enforcement. File cabinets lined one wall, a large desk in the center, and the remaining space covered by a whiteboard filled with case notes and departmental reform initiatives. Marcus cleared the desk, set up his laptop, and pulled out a notebook. Start from the beginning, he said. his fingers poised over the keyboard, every detail no matter how small. Jade recounted the entire incident. Kesler's arrival, his sudden hostility, his comment about ghetto art and crafts, the torn permit, the threats. Marcus typed quickly, pausing occasionally to ask probing questions that revealed his investigative training. Did he touch you in any way? He invaded my personal space. He got close enough that I could smell his breath, but there was no direct physical contact. Language? Specific insults? He said "you people" several times. He called the project ghetto trash. He implied we were taking over a public space that didn't belong to us. Miss Wheezy opened her notebook, comparing Jade's statement with her own observations. He said exactly, "You think the rules don't apply to you," then added, "Pick up this trash." She turned the pages. "I documented 17 similar incidents. Would you like to see them?" Marcus gave her a sharp look. 17? Are they all related to Officer Kesler? They're all at Veterans Green. They all target multiracial families. They all follow the same pattern: allegations of unauthorized activity, aggressive confrontation, forced eviction. Ms. Wheezy slid her notebook across the table. 5 years ago, after the third or fourth incident, I started keeping detailed records. I'm a teacher, Marcus. You know how I am about documentation. Marcus began photographing the pages, his expression darkening with each entry. Ms. Wheezy, this is the prosecutor's fantasy. The dates, the times, the descriptions of the victims, the specific language used. Why didn't you ever report this? Who would believe an old woman's notebook? She pointed to Jade. Her sister had permissions, witnesses, video evidence, and Kesler still ruined her project in front of everyone. What chance did I have alone? The truth of this statement dominated the room. Marcus returned to his laptop and opened the department files with password-protected access, showing that as chief he could see everything. Officer Brent Kesler, he read, 8 years with the Stone Ridge Police Department, 23 official complaints filed against him. His jaw tightened as he scrolled through the entries, and each one marked unverified or insufficient evidence. 23 complaints. Jade's voice rose. How can he still be on the force? Because he has friends in high places, union protection, and... Marcus clicked through the body camera footage. 19 of the 23 complaints relate to technical malfunctions of the body camera during the alleged incidents. This is no coincidence, Ms. Wheezy said flatly. No, it's not. Marcus picked up his phone. Rachel, it's Marcus. You need to come to my house. Now, bring Kesler's entire personnel file, everything, including sealed complaints and unresolved IA investigations. He hung up and looked at his sister. Sergeant Rachel Doyle, Internal Affairs Investigator. She's been trying to bring a case against Kesler for 2 years but keeps running into roadblocks. What kind of roadblocks? Jade asked. The kind created by District Attorney Sandra Mendoza, who refuses to prosecute cops. The kind perpetuated by Union Representative Frank Pike, who has made protecting bad cops a personal crusade. Marcus's hands clenched into fists. I've been chief for 2 weeks. I've been trying to implement reforms for 2 weeks, and I already see how deep the corruption runs. 20 minutes later, Sergeant Rachel Doyle arrived with 2 thick file boxes. She was 42, with steel-gray eyes and the bearing of someone who had battled bureaucracy for 2 decades. She placed the boxes on Marcus's dining table and looked at Jade as if she recognized her. You're the art teacher from this morning's incident. How did you find out so quickly? Because 3 different people uploaded videos to social media. Everyone in the Stone Ridge community groups is talking about it. Doyle pulled out her phone and showed a compilation of videos. The cutters are harassing you, tearing up your permit, threatening arrest. The comments section is pretty active. Jade watched herself on the screen, trying to stay calm, trying to defuse the situation, ultimately having to protect frightened children from an officer whose job was to serve and protect. The video already had over 5,000 views, and hundreds of comments expressed outrage. Good, Marcus said. Let it go viral. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. He pointed to the files. What do you have? Doyle began organizing the documents with his usual efficiency. Officer Kesler has been problematic from day one. Training officers noticed his aggressive tendencies and racial biases. Recommendations for additional sensitivity training were ignored. The first complaint came 3 months after he started excessive force during a traffic stop involving a Hispanic family. He pulled out the reports one after another and created a timeline on Marcus's whiteboard. Every complaint follows the same pattern. He targets minorities. He claims they are engaged in suspicious or unauthorized activity. He uses aggressive tactics to assert dominance. And for some reason, his body camera always malfunctions at critical moments. How is that possible? Jade asked. Don't the cameras have security measures? They do, which means someone is deliberately disabling them. Doyle pointed to a technical report. I had an outside expert examine Kesler's 3 cameras. All showed signs of manual intervention. Specific components had been removed or damaged in ways that couldn't be attributed to normal wear and tear. Marcus took notes, his investigative mind connecting the dots. If we can prove systematic camera tampering, that's proof of guilt. It shows he knew his actions were wrong and took steps to prevent documentation. That's why I've been quietly preparing this case for 2 years. Doyle pulled out a map of Stone Ridge and marked locations with colored pins. The red pins show locations in Veterans Green, where Kesler's complaints have been verified. The blue pins show incidents mentioned in rumors that the victims haven't officially reported. The yellow pins show other parks and public areas where similar incidents occurred. The map looked like a constellation of colored stars, concentrated in areas with high minority populations. "This is systematic," said Miss Wheezy, spotting the patterns with a teacher's eye. "He's not just a bad cop, he's deliberately targeting certain communities. That makes it not just abuse of duty but a civil rights violation." Marcus picked up his phone again. "We need a civil rights attorney, someone with federal prosecution experience." Jade knew who she was calling without her saying the name. Vivian Hayes. Vivian Hayes was a legend in Stone Ridge's legal community, a black woman who had built her career prosecuting police misconduct and civil rights violations. 45 years old, she had won 14 federal cases against law enforcement and was notorious for being ruthless in court. "Marcus," Vivian's voice came over the speaker. "Tell me you're calling about the Veterans Green incident. Have you seen the videos?" "Everyone has seen the videos. 6 people have already contacted me to represent them in a lawsuit against the department. But I told them to wait. I wanted to talk to you first." Marcus explained the evidence they had gathered. Ms. Wheezy's documents, complaint history, camera tampering, systematic pattern. Vivian listened without interruption, and Jade could almost hear her lawyer's mind processing everything. "This is bigger than a single case," Vivian said when Marcus finished speaking. "This is a systematic human rights case. We're talking about a federal investigation, a consent decree, a complete restructuring of the department. Can you prove it?" "With what you've told me." "Absolutely. But we need victims who are willing to testify. Most people harassed by the Cutters probably never reported it because they thought no one would listen. What if we gave them a platform?" Jade spoke up. "A community meeting. Let's allow people to share their stories publicly. Let's show them they're not alone." There was a moment of silence. "That's a really great idea," said Vivian. "Make it official. A community forum on police accountability. Advertise it widely. Create a safe space where people can come forward and document everything." Marcus had already started typing on his laptop. "I can reserve the community center for tomorrow afternoon." "Vivian, will you moderate?" "I'll do better than that. I'll bring in a legal team to get formal statements from anyone who wants to be on record." Her voice hardened with determination. Kesler made the mistake of harassing someone with resources to fight back. "Let's make sure everyone else gets justice too." After Vivian hung up, the room sprang into intense activity. Doyle organized the files into categories of evidence. Ms. Wheezy compared her ledgers to official complaint records, finding patterns that painted a damning picture. Marcus drafted the community meeting announcement while also filing formal charges against Kesler through channels that could not be concealed. Jade watched her brother's work with admiration. This was the Marcus she remembered from childhood. The Marcus who taught her to stand up to bullies, document injustice, and never accept wrongdoing as normal. Growing up, he had become exactly the person her parents wanted him to be. "What do you think?" she asked, continuing to write. "Kesler picked the wrong family to mess with." Marcus smiled bitterly. "He picked the wrong community. We're just the ones who can make their voices heard," he said. He sent the email, then turned to everyone. "All right, here's what we'll do. I'm placing Kesler on administrative leave until the investigation is complete. The union will fight this, but as chief, I have the authority to make this decision based on the evidence we've gathered. He'll be paid during the leave," Doyle cautioned. "The union contract requires it, I know, but it keeps him off the streets while we prepare the case." Marcus opened a document. "Additionally, I'm implementing urgent reforms to body cameras. All cameras now upload to cloud servers in real time. Officers cannot disable cameras without triggering automatic alerts, and any camera malfunction during a complaint incident will be flagged for independent investigation." "The union will go ballistic," Doyle said. "Let them rage. These reforms should have been made years ago." Marcus looked at Jade. "Your case was the catalyst, but this investigation will expose systemic issues that have been ongoing for years. Are you ready for that? Because once we start, there's no turning back." Jade thought of the frightened children in the park, their parents gathering themselves with a weary acceptance that they had learned resistance was futile, community members who stopped using public spaces because an officer decided they didn't belong there. "I'm ready," she said. "Let's take down everyone protecting him." The next morning, social media exploded. The community meeting announcement was shared hundreds of times. People tagged friends and added stories of harassment they'd experienced at Veterans Green and other parks. The original videos of Kesler destroying Jade's project were aired on local news channels, and reporters requested interviews. Jade's phone rang constantly. She ignored most calls but answered when Councilwoman Patricia Brooks called. "Ms. Carter, I've been following what's happening on social media. I want you to know that the City Council fully supports this investigation." Brooks' voice was warm, but there was a firm undertone. "I've been trying to address police misconduct for 3 years. Your brother becoming chief was my first real hope for change. Thank you, Councilwoman. Call me Patricia. I'll be at the community meeting this afternoon with several other council members. We need to hear these stories officially. We must turn public outrage into policy change." By noon, over 300 people had confirmed their attendance. Community center staff had to open the main hall and set up additional rooms with video feeds. Vivian Hayes arrived with 4 assistant attorneys and legal assistants, ready to document every testimony. Jade stood at the entrance greeting arrivals, and what she saw moved her. Families she had never met were sharing stories about the Keslers, but also about other officers, about systematic harassment that made them feel unsafe in their own neighborhoods. An elderly Hispanic man approached her, his hands trembling slightly. "Miss Carter? I'm Eduardo Sanchez. 3 years ago, Officer Kesler shut down my grandson's birthday party at Veterans Green. He said we were making too much noise, that we needed special permission for gatherings of more than 10 people. He made us pack up our things in front of all the children. My granddaughter cried for hours. I'm so sorry about what happened to you. I never reported it. I didn't think anyone would care." He gestured to the crowded room. "But seeing all these people, maybe we can finally get them to care." The meeting started at 2 o'clock. All the seats were taken, and people were standing along the walls. Marcus stood on the podium in full uniform, his chief's badge reflecting the lights on the ceiling. "Thank you all for coming. I'm Chief Marcus Carter, and I want to make one thing clear from the outset. I believe you. Anyone in this department who has experienced harassment, discrimination, or abuse, I believe you. And we will do something about it." Applause erupted, hesitant at first but growing louder. Today is a day for listening, a day for documentation, a day to turn individual experiences into systemic evidence that demands reform. He gestured to Vivian. "Attorney Vivian Hayes and her team are here to take official statements. Everything said here today will be recorded and used to build cases for accountability and change." Vivian took the microphone. "We are creating a safe space for truth. Everyone who wants to share their experiences will be heard and protected. Your stories matter. Your experiences matter. And together we will prove that this pattern of abuse is unacceptable." The statements began. People approached the microphone one by one and shared their stories. A black runner who had been stopped 17 times in 2 years, each time by the same officers, each time asked why he was really in that neighborhood. An Asian family whose picnic was interrupted because their traditional food smelled suspicious. A Muslim woman told she violated non-existent park dress codes because of her headscarf. And time and again, Officer Brent Kesler's name came up. But so did others. A network of officers who targeted minorities and seemed to go unpunished while their superiors looked the other way. Miss Wheezy testified about 40 years of documentation and presented notebooks filled with meticulous observations. "I am a teacher. I know what bullying looks like. And for decades I have watched bullying in our parks by the very people who are supposed to protect us." When it was Jade's turn, she continued her testimony in a focused and professional manner. However, she ended with words that reflected everyone's disappointment. "I am an elementary school art teacher. I wanted to teach children about community and creativity. Instead, I had to teach them that some officers thought they could determine where someone belonged based on the color of their skin. That is not a lesson any child should have to learn." The applause was thunderous. By 5 p.m., Vivian's team had documented 37 separate incidents involving Kesler and identified patterns in incidents involving 6 other officers. There were dates, locations, witness statements, and in most cases recorded but not officially reported photographic or video evidence. When the meeting ended, Patricia Brooks stood up to make an announcement. "The City Council will hold an emergency session this week to address these issues. We demand an independent investigation, a review of all complaint procedures, and the immediate implementation of the reforms proposed by Chief Carter. This situation is coming to an end." Outside the community center, Jade found Marcus surrounded by reporters. Standing back, she watched her brother handle the media with calm authority. "Is Officer Kesler still on duty?" asked one reporter. "He's on administrative leave until the investigation is complete. I can't comment on the details, but I can say that every allegation will be thoroughly investigated with independent oversight." "What about the malfunctioning body cameras?" "We've implemented new protocols that make it impossible for officers to disable their cameras without immediate notification. complete audit trails for all recordings, zero tolerance for tampering. When the reporters dispersed, Doyle approached Marcus. "Chief, you need to see this." He showed him his phone, a text message from an unknown number. "You're making powerful enemies, back off or face the consequences." Marcus's expression didn't change. He took a screenshot of the message and sent it to the evidence folder. "Document it, add it to the threat file, and inform the sender that threats only make me more determined to pursue reform." That evening, Jade sat in her office with Miss Wheezy and Marcus, reviewing the day's evidence. 37 victims, 6 police officers guilty, a pattern spanning nearly a decade, and at the center of it all was police officer Brent Kesler, who believed he was untouchable thanks to his badge and union protection. "We'll file federal civil rights charges tomorrow," Vivian said over the speakerphone. "I have sufficient evidence of pattern and practice violations. The Justice Department will have to investigate." "How long until the trial?" Jade asked. "Months." Federal cases move slowly, but the evidence is very strong. Kesler is finished, and so are those protecting him. After Vivian hung up, Jade looked at the whiteboard filled with evidence, connections, and reform proposals. "We did it. We really did it. We started it," Marcus corrected. "Now comes the hard part, making the changes permanent. Ensuring the department is properly restructured, ensuring the victims get justice, and ensuring no employee has to abandon another person's community project because someone decided they didn't belong here," Jade added. Miss Wheezy closed her notebook decisively. "For 40 years, I've watched injustice in that park. For 40 years, I've waited for someone with the power to care. Thank you both for being those people." The fight had only just begun. But Jade looked at the evidence gathered, the documents, the testimonies, the pattern laid out for all to see. She felt something she hadn't felt in the park yesterday. Hope. Officer Kesler had ruined the project. But in doing so, he had triggered something much more powerful. A community that refused to accept abuse as normal. A police chief willing to hold his own department accountable. And a movement for change that could not be buried or ignored. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. Tonight, they had the evidence, the witnesses, and the determination to see justice served. The Stone Ridge City Council chamber was designed to comfortably seat 200 people. When the emergency hearing began at 10 o'clock on Wednesday morning, over 400 people had squeezed into the chamber, with another 100 watching from overflow rooms and live video feeds. The air was thick with tension. Community members who had shared their stories at the weekend meeting now faced the official government mechanism that would either hear or dismiss their testimonies. Everything hinged on whether the city council had the political will to stand up to the police union and the district attorney's office. Jade, Marcus, Miss Wheezy, and Vivian Hayes behind them. Families filled the seats in rows. Eduardo Sanchez with his grandchild, the Muslim woman, harassed for wearing a headscarf, the black runner stopped 17 times, and dozens of others whose stories had emerged at community meetings. At the council table, 7 members sat, including Council Member Patricia Brooks, who had called this emergency session. The agenda item was simple but explosive. Review of Police Officer Brent Kesler's administrative leave and evaluation of disciplinary action. Before the statements began, the side door opened, and Union Representative Frank Pike entered with 3 lawyers. 58-year-old Pike had been protecting bad cops for 20 years. He shielded officers from accountability using union contracts and legal technicalities. He carried himself with the confidence of someone who had never lost a fight. "Councilman Brooks," Pike said without waiting to be recognized, "I am here representing Officer Kesler and the Stone Ridge Police Officers Union. We object to this case on procedural grounds. Officer Kesler was placed on administrative leave without proper consultation with the union, without following the necessary legal process, and based on videos posted on social media instead of an official investigation." The expression on Patricia Brooks' face did not change. "Mr. Pike, you will have an opportunity to speak during the public comment period. Please be seated." "This is a witch hunt," Pike continued, raising his voice. "Chief Carter has been on the job for 2 weeks, and already he's targeting decorated officers based on unfounded complaints. Mr. Pike," Brooks' voice was razor sharp, "sit down or you will be removed from this room." Pike sat down, but the message was clear. The union would fight every step of the way. District Attorney Sandra Mendoza entered the room with her legal team. 45-year-old Mendoza had built her career on being tough on crime. In practice, this meant aggressively prosecuting minorities while providing officers with near unlimited protection. She had dismissed all complaints against Kesler. "Mr. Chairman," Mendoza said politely, "the district attorney's office has reviewed the allegations against Officer Kesler and found insufficient evidence for criminal prosecution. The incidents in question are legitimate law enforcement activities that have been misrepresented by individuals with an anti-police agenda." Jade felt Marcus tense beside her, but Marcus remained silent. This wasn't his scene. Not yet. His role would come later. Brooks opened the hearing. We are here to examine evidence of systematic civil rights violations and police misconduct. The City Council takes these allegations seriously, and we will hear testimony from affected community members, law enforcement officers, and expert witnesses. He looked directly at Pike and Mendoza. Everyone will follow proper procedures, everyone will be respectful, and everyone will be held accountable for the facts. The first witness was Vivian Hayes, who presented a damning summary of the evidence her team had compiled. Using a large screen, she displayed patterns, timelines, and statistical analyses that painted an undeniable picture. Over 8 years, Officer Kesler received 23 official complaints, Vivian stated, emphasizing the data. This is 3 times the department average. Timelines and statistical analyses. Over 8 years, Officer Kesler received 23 official complaints, Vivian stated, highlighting the data. That's 3 times the department average. 19 of these complaints were related to body camera malfunctions. If these malfunctions were random, it would be statistically impossible. And 100% of the complaints involved minorities, even though only 40% of Stone Ridge's population is non-white. She moved to the next slide showing Miss Wheezy's documents. An independent witness documented 17 additional incidents over 5 years that were never officially reported because the victims thought no one would listen. Combined with the 37 testimonies from this weekend's community meeting, we have documented evidence of a systematic pattern. Pike immediately stood up. Objection. These are unverified claims. Mr. Pike. Brooks cut him off. This isn't a courtroom. Sit down. Vivian continued, presenting video compilations from multiple incidents. The screens showed Kesler harassing families at Veterans Green. Always minorities, always aggressive, always using some vague authority to remove people from public spaces. The pattern was undeniable. The law is clear, Vivian concluded. This constitutes a violation of civil rights under the guise of the law. This is not merely abuse of power, it is a federal crime. Prosecutor Mendoza stood to object. These videos show officers doing their jobs, maintaining order in public spaces, responding to complaints, enforcing regulations. Some people's discomfort with legitimate law enforcement does not constitute a violation of civil rights. What complaint? Marcus asked the audience, his voice carrying an authority that turned heads. I reviewed all call logs for Veterans Green over the past 3 years. There was not a single complaint before Officer Kesler's interventions. He initiated contact at his discretion, a discretion he consistently applied only to minorities. Mendoza's face flushed. Chief Carter, you are not a witness here. Actually, I am. Marcus stood up and calmly walked toward the witness stand. I am the police chief who, despite your refusal to prosecute, has exposed my department's years of systematic civil rights violations. Furthermore, I am the brother who watched as my sister's community art project, properly permitted, entirely legal, was labeled ghetto trash, and threatening children to destroy it. The room fell silent. I have access to all the complaints filed against Officer Kesler, Marcus continued, pulling out his tablet. Each one has been marked unfounded by your office without any meaningful investigation. Each body camera malfunction was not a coincidence, as you claim. Each pattern you chose to ignore because prosecuting officers was politically inconvenient. This is slander, Mendoza began. This is documented fact. I have emails from your office instructing staff not to pursue Kesler complaints because it didn't look good. I have records of you telling victims their cases weren't worth prosecuting. I have evidence showing that you have been protecting bad officers for years. Brooks leaned forward. Chief Carter, are you saying that the prosecutor's office deliberately dismissed legitimate complaints? I'm saying there's a pattern of non-prosecution that allows Officer Kesler's behavior to continue unchecked, and I'm prepared to present all the evidence to federal investigators. Murmurs rose in the courtroom. Pike and Mendoza began to speak at once, but Brooks silenced them with a bang of his gavel. We will hear testimony from community witnesses, he announced. First, Miss Jade Carter. Jade walked to the witness stand, aware of the eyes of hundreds upon her. She had rehearsed her statement with Vivian, focusing on facts rather than emotions, but when she began to speak, her suppressed anger surfaced. I am an elementary school art teacher. I organized a community beautification project. We painted birdhouses with the children to place in Veterans Green. I had permits. I had insurance. I had parental consent forms. Everything was done legally and appropriately. He played the video on the room's screens. This is the moment Officer Kesler revoked my permit and called our project ghetto trash. This is the moment he threatened to arrest the parents and children for trespassing on public property we had permission to use. This is the moment he said you all need to pick up and leave. The video played from start to finish. Kesler's aggression, his racist language, the frightened children, the parents being forced to leave. When the video ended, several council members looked visibly disturbed. I'm not just a victim, Jade continued. I'm a witness to a pattern. After my incident, 37 people came forward with nearly identical stories. Same officer, same park, same targets, same abuse of authority. The only difference is that I have a brother who is a police chief and the resources to fight back. Most victims don't. Pike stood up again. This is character assassination based on selective editing. These are unedited footage from multiple cameras, Vivian interjected. All time-stamped, all verified. The full recordings are ready for review. Next, Miss Wheezy testified and presented her 40 years of documentation with the methodical precision of an experienced teacher. She read specific entries, her voice steady but filled with quiet anger. June 2019, Officer Kesler ordered a Hispanic family to leave the playground, claiming they were too noisy, and ordered a Hispanic family to leave the playground. The family had been there for 30 minutes. A nearby white family was just as noisy, but they were not approached. July 2019, the same officer confronted black youths playing basketball and accused them of gambling because they were keeping score. August 2019, the entries continued and painted a devastating picture. Pike tried many times to object, discredit, and dismiss. However, Ms. Wheezy's meticulous records, complete with dates, time, weather, and corroborating details, were indisputable. Eduardo Sanchez testified about his granddaughter's ruined birthday party. A Muslim woman recounted being told her religious dress violated non-existent rules. The black runner detailed how he had been stopped 17 times in 2 years, questioned each time, released each time, and stopped each time by officers who somehow forgot to record their encounters in their reports. By noon, the testimonies had revealed an undeniable pattern. Even initially skeptical council members seemed convinced. Then Pike played his trump card. Councilman Brooks. There is a petition signed by Stone Ridge police officers demanding Officer Kesler's immediate reinstatement. These dedicated public servants believe he is being made a scapegoat for doing his job. If Kesler is not reinstated, they are prepared to take industrial action. The threat was clear: reinstate Kesler, or face a police strike. Brooks's face hardened. Mr. Pike, are you threatening this council? I am informing you of the officer's legitimate concerns regarding fair trial and political interference in law enforcement operations. Fair trial? Marcus's voice broke the tension. Your client received a fair trial for 8 years while violating citizens' civil rights. Every complaint was investigated and dismissed. Every incident was investigated and covered up. He received more fair trials than his victims. You're biased. You're his sister's brother. I am a police chief sworn to uphold the law, and the law says that the violation of civil rights is a federal crime regardless of who commits it. As the debate heated up, Pike and Marcus grew increasingly heated in their words, while Brooks tried to maintain order. The room descended into chaos. Voices rose, and supporters on both sides began to get excited. Then the side door opened and Officer Brent Kesler entered. He wasn't wearing his uniform. Instead, he was dressed in jeans and a polo shirt, in civilian clothes, and this attire somehow made him appear more threatening. His face was flushed, his jaw clenched, and Jade immediately noticed the body language of someone struggling to suppress his anger. Officer Kesler, Brooks said sternly. You are not scheduled to testify. I have the right to defend myself, Kesler interrupted, striding toward the witness stand. Everyone here is sitting around calling me a racist, saying I violated their rights, destroying my reputation with edited videos and people with personal agendas. He turned to face the courtroom, and Jade saw the microphone pinned to his lapel. It was the same microphone witnesses wore for clear audio recording. A council staff member had attached it before anyone realized Kesler shouldn't be there. I've served this community for 8 years, Kesler continued, his voice rising. I kept the park safe. I've kept order. I've made sure people follow the rules. And what do I get in return? To be suspended over complaints from people who think they can do whatever they want. Officer Kesler, Brooks tried to interrupt. People who come to our parks with their unauthorized activities and attitudes, who think public space is theirs. Officer Kesler, you bringing their ghetto culture and disrespect for authority, and when we try to uphold standards, we're labeled as racist. Marcus stood up. Kesler, that's enough. Kesler turned to him, the anger in his expression giving way to madness. You're the worst. Do you think you're better than the others because they made you chief? You're no different from the rest of them. Then came a very ugly racist slur that took the breath away from several people in the room. Kesler seemed not to notice or care. The dam had broken, and years of pent-up hatred poured out. You're ruining this department, Kesler continued, advancing toward Marcus. We used to be able to keep the ghettos where they belonged, keep our neighborhoods safe, but now, he lunged at Marcus, his hands reaching for his throat. 2 things happened simultaneously. Sergeant Rachel Doyle, monitoring security in the back, moved with the speed of someone trained in 20 years of tactics, stopping Kesler and pinning him face down on the floor. All the screens in the room showed what was happening. Kesler's microphone had relayed everything to the courtroom, overflow areas, and the live video feed being watched by 300 people in their homes. "Get off me," Kesler shouted, struggling against Doyle's grip. "You can't do this. I have rights." "Officer Brent Kesler," Doyle said, his voice carrying absolute authority as he applied the handcuffs, "you are under arrest for assaulting a police officer, making terrorist threats, and disorderly conduct. This is bullshit. This is political. All of you." More insults poured out, each one still picked up by the microphone broadcasting to every screen. Pike stepped forward. "You can't arrest him. I'm calling the union representative. Your client attacked the police chief, hurling racist threats live on air in front of 400 witnesses," Doyle said flatly. "The union can represent him during the recording." As Doyle led Kesler, who was still shouting, toward the exit, the room fell into stunned silence. Then someone began to clap, then another. Within seconds, the applause swelled into a roar. Brooks banged the gavel to restore order, but there was satisfaction on his face. "All right. I believe Officer Kesler has made a convincing statement regarding his suitability for the job. The council will now make its decision." The decision-making process took less than 30 minutes. When the council returned, Brooks read the decision, struggling to hide his anger. Based on the evidence presented, including the testimony of 37 community members, documented incidents of harassment, tampering with body cameras, and Officer Kesler's conduct in this chamber, the Stone Ridge City Council voted 6-1 to immediately terminate Officer Brent Kesler's employment. Furthermore, we are requesting a federal investigation into the Stone Ridge Police Department's systematic civil rights violations and are instructing Chief Carter to implement comprehensive reforms. He looked at Mendoza. Furthermore, we are requesting the State Attorney General to investigate the prosecutor's office, which is accused of failing to pursue legitimate complaints. And we are informing Union Representative Pike that threats of a walkout in response to accountability measures will not be tolerated. The room erupted again, this time with joy. Families embraced each other. People cried. Mrs. Wheezy sat with her hands folded, a small smile of satisfaction on her worn face. Outside the hall, reporters surrounded Marcus and turned their cameras on him. "Chief Carter, what are your thoughts on the dismissal of your officer?" "I believe justice has been served. Officer Kesler violated civil rights, abused his authority, and demonstrated through his words and actions that he was unfit for law enforcement. This dismissal was a necessary and appropriate decision." "What about the union's threats?" "The union exists to protect officers' rights, not to shield them from accountability. Officers who perform their duties honorably have nothing to fear from these reforms. Officers who abuse their authority will have to face the consequences." "Was the incident involving your sister the catalyst for this investigation?" Marcus looked at Jade standing beside him. "What happened to my sister was the catalyst. But this investigation has uncovered systematic abuses that have been going on for years and should never have been allowed to continue. Jade Carter brought this to light. The community provided the evidence. And now we are doing what should have been done years ago, holding people accountable." A reporter turned to Jade. "Ms. Carter, what will you do next?" "I'm going to finish our birdhouse project," Jade replied. "The project Officer Kesler destroyed. Because that park belongs to everyone, and I won't allow a racist cop to decide who gets to use public space." That evening, Jade, Marcus, Miss Wheezy, Vivian, and Doyle in Marcus's office that evening, watching the news about the incident dubbed the statewide hot mic incident. Kesler's racist remarks had aired on all local channels, been shared thousands of times on social media, and made national news as an example of police racism caught on camera. The Stone Ridge Police Department was facing a federal investigation. District Attorney Mendoza had announced he would not seek re-election. Union Representative Pike was under investigation for a threat charge. "Tomorrow we'll get down to the real work," Marcus said. "Federal oversight, a complete overhaul of complaint procedures, retraining every officer, building trust with the communities we failed. Tomorrow we restart our art project," Jade added. "And this time no one will stop us." Mrs. Wheezy closed her notebook, the final entry in 40 years of documentation. Justice has finally come to Veterans Green. It took 40 years, but it came. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sunset paint the sky with golden hues. Kesler was in custody. Mendoza was disgraced. Pike was neutralized. And Stone Ridge had begun the long, arduous process of rebuilding trust between the police and the communities they served. The struggle was not over. But tonight they could rest knowing that responsibility had prevailed. 4 months after Officer Brent Kesler's spectacular collapse in the city council chamber, the federal courthouse in the regional capital stood majestically against the clear autumn sky. The building's classical architecture, marble columns, wide steps, the scales of justice carved above the entrance had been designed to reflect authority and impartiality. In courtroom 4B, that impartiality would be tested. The case was United States v. Brent Kesler and Sandra Mendoza, federal civil rights charges carrying potential penalties that could reshape both defendants' lives. Kesler faced charges of unlawful deprivation of rights, conspiracy, and assault on a police officer. Mendoza, after months of federal investigation, was accused of obstructing justice and conspiring to violate civil rights by systematically denying legitimate complaints. The courtroom was packed. Jade sat in the front row behind the prosecution table, surrounded by 37 community members who had testified in this case. Marcus was in the back. He would testify but wanted to remain inconspicuous until called. Mrs. Wheezy sat with her usual notebook, but today it was closed. 40 years of documents had already been submitted as evidence. At the prosecution table, U.S. Assistant Attorney James Chen sat with Vivian Hayes, who had been appointed as a special advisor due to her expertise in civil rights cases. They had spent 4 months preparing for this case, which Chen described as the best documented model and application case I've ever seen. At the defense table, Kesler and Mendoza sat with their own legal teams. These expensive lawyers had tried every procedural trick to get the charges dismissed, the evidence rejected, or the case moved elsewhere. The 62-year-old federal judge, Howard Chen, was known for his serious demeanor in the courtroom and had rejected all requests. "All rise," announced the court clerk. The United States District Court for this district, presided over by Mr. Howard Chen, is now in session. Judge Chen sat down at the bench, his face expressionless. "Be seated. We are here for the trial of the case between the United States and Brent Kesler and Sandra Mendoza. Are both parties ready?" "The United States is ready, Your Honor," Chen replied. "The defense is ready," said Kesler's attorney, Marcus Brennan, an expensive lawyer known for defending police officers. "The defense is ready," added Mendoza's attorney, though his voice lacked Brennan's self-assured tone. "Very well, Mr. Chen, make your opening statement." The federal prosecutor stood and began addressing the jury with calm authority. The 12 jurors seated in the jury box were diverse in age, race, and background, carefully selected over a 3-day process. "Ladies and gentlemen, this case is about power and abuse. For 8 years, Officer Brent Kesler systematically harassed minorities in Stone Ridge's public parks, using his badge and authority. He targeted families for making noise, young people for playing basketball, teachers for organizing art projects, always people of color, always claiming they violated non-existent rules, always forcibly removing them from spaces they had every right to use." Chen displayed the first piece of evidence on the courtroom screens, a map of Stone Ridge marked with colored pins showing the locations where the incidents occurred. The evidence will show 47 documented incidents over 8 years, each targeted minorities, each involved Officer Kesler, and 19 of these incidents included body camera malfunctions that we will prove were deliberately tampered with to prevent documentation. Kesler clicked through photos showing him revoking Jade's permit. On June 12th of this year, Officer Kesler revoked a legal permit for a community art project, used racist language, threatened children and parents, and forcibly removed them from public property. This incident was recorded by multiple cameras and witnessed by dozens of people. The prosecutor's voice hardened. However, this case is not just about Officer Kesler. This case also concerns District Attorney Sandra Mendoza, who received 23 official complaints about Kesler over 8 years and dismissed them all without conducting any meaningful investigation. The evidence will show that Mendoza systematically protected Kesler and other officers and allowed civil rights violations to continue unchecked. He turned directly to the jury. "The law is clear. Depriving someone of their civil rights under the guise of the law is a federal crime. Conspiring to cover up these violations is a federal crime. And when you hear all the evidence, the witness testimony, the videos, the documents spanning 40 years, you will have no doubt that both defendants are guilty." Kesler's attorney, Brennan, stood to deliver his opening statement. He was 60 years old, silver-haired, with the soft-spoken manner of someone with decades of courtroom experience. "Ladies and gentlemen, this case concerns a police officer performing his duties under difficult circumstances. Officer Kesler was patrolling public parks where rules needed to be enforced, disorder controlled, and safety ensured. Did he sometimes make decisions that upset people? Yes. Is that the same as violating civil rights? Absolutely not." Brennan pointed dismissively at the evidence boards. "The prosecution will show you incidents where Officer Kesler intervened in situations requiring police action. They will claim it's a pattern and a conspiracy. But what you'll actually see is an officer who was constantly criticized by people who disrespected authority, trying to maintain order." It was a weak opening statement, and Brennan knew it. The open mic recording had ruined any chance of portraying Kesler sympathetically, but he had to try. Mendoza's lawyer focused on prosecutorial discretion, arguing that the prosecutor had legitimate reasons for not pursuing the complaints and that his decisions were judicial rulings, not a conspiracy. Judge Chen called the first witness. The United States may call its first witness. The United States calls Jade Carter. Jade walked to the witness stand and raised her right hand to take the oath. She and Vivian had spent weeks preparing for this moment, but her heart was still pounding as she looked out at the crowd in the courtroom. Chen began gently. Miss Carter, please tell the jury about your profession. I work as an elementary school art teacher at Stone Ridge Elementary School. I have been teaching for 6 years. And what were you doing at Veterans Green Park on June 12th of this year? Jade described the community art project, the planning, the permits, the excited children, and the supportive parents. Then she described Kesler's arrival and the systematic destruction of something joyful. He called it ghetto art and craft, Jade said, her voice steady despite her emotion. You always think the rules don't apply to you, he said. He tore my permit in half and told me to pack up or he'd start arresting people. Were you doing something illegal? No. I had full authorization from the Parks Department, insurance, parental consent forms. Everything was completely legal. Chen played a video containing unedited footage from 3 different cameras showing the incident from start to finish. The jury watched Kesler's aggression, his racist remarks, the frightened children, and Jade calmly trying to defuse the situation. When the video ended, several jurors looked uncomfortable. How did this incident make you feel? Humiliated, angry, helpless. Jade looked directly at Kesler, who sat stone-faced at the defense table. But most of all, I felt sorry for the children who learned that day that their skin color could determine whether they were welcome in public spaces. Brennan's cross-examination attempted to imply that Jade was argumentative, drew negative attention, and that Kesler was merely responding to complaints. However, each question was contradicted by video evidence showing the opposite. Is it true that you refused to show identification when asked? I showed my permit. Officer Kesler destroyed it. You raised your voice at a police officer after he called our project Ghetto trash and threatened to arrest the kids for painting birdhouses on public property that we had permission to use. The cross-examination ended inconclusively. Brennan sat down, disappointed. Marcus testified with the authority of a police chief and the expertise of a former internal affairs investigator. Chief Carter, you reviewed Officer Kesler's personnel file. What did you find? 23 official complaints over 8 years. That's nearly 3 times the department average. 19 of those complaints involved body camera malfunctions during the alleged incidents. Despite only 40% of our city's population being non-white, 100% of the complaints targeted minorities. Marcus presented statistical analyses showing that Kesler's behavior pattern was mathematically impossible to be random or coincidental. He explained that the body camera protocols and how the malfunctions were clearly tampered with. As a police chief and former IA investigator, in your professional opinion, was Officer Kesler conducting legitimate law enforcement or systematic harassment? Systematic harassment. This pattern is undeniable. Racial targeting is blatantly evident, and the tampering with the body camera shows guilt. He knew his actions were wrong and took steps to prevent them from being documented. The defense attempted to portray Marcus as biased because Jade is his sister. However, Marcus's references and the objective evidence he presented neutralized this attack. Miss Wheezy's testimony was perhaps the most powerful. 72 years old, she presented 40 years of documentation with the meticulousness of a professional educator. Miss Thompson, why did you start keeping these records? Because I'm a teacher. I know what bullying looks like, and I've seen it happening in our parks for decades. She opened one of her notebooks. This is from June 2019. Officer Kesler ordered the Sanchez family to leave during their grandchildren's birthday party, citing a non-existent noise violation. Nearby white families, despite being just as loud, were not disturbed. He read each one meticulously, with the date and explanation. The cumulative effect was devastating, a cycle that had been going on for years, all targeting minorities and ignored by the authorities. Why didn't you report this to the police? I did. 5 times over the years. Every complaint was dismissed. Eventually I realized my role was to be a witness and hope that one day someone with power would care enough to act. The prosecutor called 37 community members over 3 days. Each recounted stories of harassment. A Hispanic family's barbecue was interrupted. A Muslim woman was told her headscarf violated dress codes. A black runner was stopped 17 times. An Asian family was accused of loitering. Expert witnesses testified about body camera tampering, statistical analysis of complaint patterns, and civil rights law. The evidence was overwhelming and methodical. Then came the most crucial piece of evidence, a microphone recording from the city council hearing. As Kesler's voice filled the room spewing racist insults and hateful words, threatening Marcus, admitting to protecting the standards that kept the parks free of ghetto culture, the courtroom fell silent. His attack on Marcus, including racist insults, physical assault, and a complete loss of control, was fully recorded. Several jurors looked at Kesler with obvious disgust. Regarding Mendoza's case, the prosecution presented emails showing that Kesler and other officers systematically dismissed complaints against them. Correspondence instructing employees not to pursue cases that would create political problems. The records showed that Mendoza was aware of this situation but chose to protect the officers rather than the victims. The defense called character witnesses such as officers praising Kesler's dedication, community members who felt safe thanks to his patrols, and experts claiming the complaints were unusual. However, the defense also called witnesses who claimed the complaints were not unusual, called character witnesses such as officers praising Kesler's dedication, community members who felt safe thanks to his patrols, and experts claiming the complaints were not unusual. However, all witnesses collapsed under cross-examination when confronted with video evidence, statistical analyses, and Kesler's own words spoken while the microphone was open. Kesler himself did not testify. His lawyer objected. The open microphone recording already provided damning testimony against him. Mendoza testified and attempted to explain his decisions as prosecutorial discretion. However, Chen methodically reviewed the cases one by one, showing that he dismissed legitimate complaints without investigation and protected officers despite clear evidence of misconduct. Over 8 years, you received 17 complaints about Officer Kesler. You dismissed all 17 complaints. Did you interview any of the complainants? I reviewed the written reports. Did you meet with any of the complainants? Yes or no? Did you review the body camera footage? The cameras were malfunctioning, 19 times with the same officer. Did that concern you? I trusted the department's technical explanations. Did you request an independent technical analysis? No. Did you consider that 19 malfunctions by one officer could indicate tampering? I assumed the department had handled the matter. Cross-examination was a surgical procedure that revealed Mendoza's deliberate turning a blind eye to obvious patterns, because acknowledging them would have required holding officers accountable. After 2 weeks of testimony, closing arguments were made on Friday afternoon. Chen stood before the jury one last time. You've seen the evidence. 47 documented incidents, statistical proof of racial targeting, video showing Officer Kesler's racism and violence, expert testimony that the body camera was tampered with. And you heard Kesler's own words, racist slurs, his admission of maintaining discriminatory standards, his attack on a police chief who dared to hold him accountable. He pointed toward the defense table. Officer Kesler systematically violated civil rights for 8 years. District Attorney Mendoza enabled these violations by refusing to prosecute despite overwhelming evidence. They thought their positions made them untouchable. They were wrong. The jury deliberated for 7 hours over 2 days. When they returned, the jury foreman, a 58-year-old black woman who had worked as a social worker for 30 years, stood and read the verdict in a calm voice. In the case of the United States Brent Kesler, charged with violating rights under the guise of the law, we find the defendant guilty. She read all the charges: guilty of conspiracy, guilty of assaulting a police officer, guilty of civil rights violations, guilty on all 18 charges. In the case of the United States versus Sandra Mendoza, we find the defendant guilty of obstruction of justice, guilty of conspiracy to violate civil rights, guilty of abuse of office, guilty on all 7 charges. The courtroom erupted in measured cheers. Families hugged each other. Mrs. Wheezy smiled with satisfaction, and Marcus closed his eyes in relief. Tears streamed down Jade's face. Judge Chen banged his gavel to restore order. Sentencing will be held 6 weeks from today. The defendants will remain in federal custody until the verdict is delivered. As the marshals led Kesler and Mendoza away in handcuffs, Kesler's face showed the shock of someone who truly believed his badge would protect him forever. Outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded Jade, Marcus, and Vivian. Miss Carter, how do you feel? I was proven right. I'm grateful. But I'm also aware that this victory came because I had resources most victims don't have: a brother who's a police chief, a lawyer willing to take the case, a community willing to testify. Too many people suffer abuse in silence because they think no one will believe them. Chief Carter, what does this decision mean for Stone Ridge? It means accountability is possible. It means there are consequences for civil rights violations. And it means we are committed to continuing reform so this never happens again. Attorney Hayes, how much punishment are you seeking? The maximum punishment allowed under federal law. Officer Kesler used his authority to terrorize people for 8 years. Prosecutor Mendoza made that terror possible. They deserve every year of their sentence. That evening, Jade sat with Marcus, Mrs. Wheezy, and Vivian in a quiet restaurant, away from cameras and celebrations. 40 years, Mrs. Wheezy said softly. For 40 years I kept records hoping someone would care. Thank you for making them matter. You made them matter, Jade replied. Your documents formed the basis of this case. Without you, my word would have stood against Kesler's. Marcus raised his glass. To justice. Slow, flawed, but real. They clinked glasses and savored the moment. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Sentencing hearings, ongoing reforms, the ongoing work of rebuilding trust. But tonight, They could rest knowing that two people who had abused their power for years would finally face the consequences. Officer Brent Kesler and prosecutor Sandra Mendoza had learned what Jade had known all along. Badges and titles do not grant immunity from justice. They only make the fall harder. 6 weeks after the guilty verdict, the same federal courtroom filled again for sentencing. The atmosphere was different now. There was no tension stemming from uncertainty, but the weight of justice measured in prison time was palpable. Jade sat in the front row, surrounded by community members who had testified at the trial. Behind them, the courtroom was packed with people who had followed the months-long trial. Marcus sat in the back rows, fully dressed in his police chief uniform, a symbolic choice that showed law enforcement could hold itself accountable. At the defense table, Kesler and Mendoza sat in orange prison jumpsuits. Federal custody had stripped away any remaining image of authority. Kesler looked diminished, his former arrogance replaced by a vacant-eyed resignation. Mendoza looked older, the weight of his conviction visible in the revealed the weight of his sentence. Judge Howard Chen entered the courtroom with a serious expression. He had spent the last 6 weeks reviewing pre-sentence reports, statements describing the impact on victims, and extensive documentation of the damage caused by the defendants. This court has presided over many cases involving abuse of authority, Judge Chen began, but very few have violated civil rights so systematically, deliberately, and continuously over such a long period of time. He projected the statistics onto the screens in the courtroom. Over 8 years, Officer Kesler carried out 47 documented unlawful stops targeting minorities. He systematically tampered with body cameras to prevent documentation. He used racist language and intimidation tactics to remove citizens from public spaces they had a legal right to occupy. And when the time came to face accountability, he attacked a police chief by hurling racist threats on live television. Judge Chen turned to Mendoza. District Attorney Mendoza received 23 official complaints about Officer Kesler over the same 8 years. He dismissed each one without conducting a meaningful investigation. The evidence shows he systematically protected officers who violated civil rights because prosecuting them was politically inconvenient. He allowed years of abuse to continue that could have been stopped had he done his job. The judge looked at both defendants. What you did more than harm individuals. You damaged the relationship between law enforcement and the communities they serve. You created fear where there should be trust. You proved that some people's worst suspicions about corrupt officials were absolutely justified. He started with Kesler. Officer Brent Kesler, stand up. Kesler slowly stood up, his hands cuffed in front of him. For 47 counts of violating rights under the law, I sentence you to 8 years in federal prison. For conspiracy, I sentence you to 2 consecutive years in prison. For assaulting a police officer, I sentence you to 2 consecutive years in prison. For the crime of violating civil rights with the aggravating factor of a hate crime, I sentence you to 3 consecutive years in prison. Total sentence 15 years in federal prison, without the possibility of parole. This figure was a heavy blow. Kesler, who was 43 years old, would be 58 when released. His career would be ruined, his most productive years behind him, his reputation permanently tarnished. Furthermore, continued Judge Chen, you will forfeit all retirement benefits you have accrued during your employment. You will be permanently barred from any law enforcement, security, or government position. Upon release, you will serve 5 years of supervised release with mandatory community service in parks where you violated citizens' rights. Kesler's face showed no emotion, but his hands trembled slightly as the marshals led him back to his seat. Judge Chen turned to Mendoza. Sandra Mendoza, rise. Mendoza stood, her expensive lawyers standing beside her. For 7 counts of obstruction of justice, I sentence you to 5 years in federal prison. For conspiracy to violate civil rights, you are sentenced to 3 consecutive years in prison. For abuse of office, you are sentenced to 2 consecutive years in prison. Total sentence 10 years in federal prison. Mendoza, who will be 51 years old when she is released, will be 61 when he is released. His legal career will be over, his political ambitions destroyed. You will forfeit all your retirement benefits. You are permanently disbarred. And you are barred for life from holding any public office or government position. Judge Chen addressed the courtroom. To the victims, these penalties cannot compensate for the harm you suffered. They cannot bring back ruined birthday parties, destroyed art projects, or violated feelings of security. But I hope they provide some closure and send a clear message that such abuses will not be tolerated in our justice system. He looked directly at Jade. Miss Carter, your courage to fight in a situation where most would remain silent, your brother's determination to pursue reform despite resistance, and Ms. Thompson's 40 years of documentation work, together you have exposed corruption that has been allowed to run rampant for far too long. This community owes you a debt of gratitude. As marshals led Kesler and Mendoza away for the last time, Jade was filled with mixed emotions. She was relieved that justice had been served. saddened by the years of abuse that had continued until this moment, and determined to ensure the reforms were permanent. Outside the courthouse, the media surrounded the key figures in the case. "Miss Carter, does this punishment feel like justice?" "It feels like accountability," Jade replied carefully. 15 years won't make up for what Officer Kesler did to dozens of families, but it proves that civil rights violations have consequences, that badges don't grant immunity, and that communities can successfully fight back against systematic abuse. Another reporter turned to Marcus. "Chief Carter, what reforms have been implemented in Stone Ridge?" "Comprehensive changes. All body cameras now upload in real time to independent cloud servers. Officers cannot disable them without triggering an automatic investigation. We established a civilian oversight board with subpoena power. Every complaint is recorded and investigated by external auditors. We also implemented mandatory bias training and de-escalation protocols." "How did officers react to this?" "Most officers support the changes because they make good policing easier and protect officers who do their job right. A small minority resistant to reform has been identified and is being closely monitored or asked to leave." Vivian Hayes spoke about broader implications. "This case sets a precedent for holding both officers and prosecutors accountable for civil rights violations. We are seeing similar reforms being implemented in other judicial districts. Stone Ridge has become a cautionary tale, but also a model for change." 3 months after the ruling, on a cool Saturday morning in early spring, a dedication ceremony was held at Veterans Green Park, where the healing was almost visible. The transformation was remarkable. The park had been completely renovated with compensation money from a civil rights lawsuit against the city. New playground equipment, walking paths with adequate lighting, picnic areas with accessible facilities, and most importantly, 50 birdhouses painted by children and adults from every neighborhood in Stone Ridge. Jade stood next to the central sycamore tree, where her project had been vandalized 9 months earlier. But today, instead of scattered art supplies and frightened children, hundreds of families had gathered to celebrate. Black, Hispanic, Asian, white, every demographic group in Stone Ridge had come together. The birdhouses formed a rainbow over the park. Some were meticulously painted with realistic bird scenes. Others were adorned with abstract designs, bright colors, and children's handprints. Each represented a family's contribution to reclaiming this space. "What a transformation," said Mrs. Wheezy, sitting on one of the 20 benches where plaques honoring community members who fought for justice were placed. Hers read, "Louise Wheezy Thompson. Teacher, witness, chronicler of truth, 40 years of documentation made justice possible." "Beautiful," Jade agreed. "Exactly as I envisioned it when I first planned this project." Marcus approached in civilian clothes. He was still playing the role of police chief, but he had learned to actually take leave occasionally. "The mayor is ready to begin the dedication ceremony. Are you nervous?" "I'm excited. Recovery is like that." The ceremony began with former council member Brooks, now Mayor Patricia Brooks, who had been overwhelmingly elected after her leadership during the Kesler investigation. She stood on the podium next to the new community center pavilion. "We are gathered here today not just to open a renovated park, but to honor a community that refused to accept injustice as normal," Brooks began. 9 months ago, a teacher tried to organize an art project in this park. A police officer ruined that project with racist remarks and threats. This incident exposed decades of systematic abuse. He gestured to the gathered crowd. But look what happened next. Instead of accepting defeat, this community organized. They documented, they testified, they resisted, and they won. Today, we are reclaiming this space not just for some, but for everyone. Brooks introduced speakers who shared brief testimonies. Eduardo Sanchez recounted how he could finally celebrate his grandchild's birthday in the park without fear. A Muslim woman who had been harassed for wearing a headscarf described how she brought her children here to play freely. A black runner detailed how he could now run in the park every day without being stopped. When Jade was introduced, she walked onto the stage holding the first painted birdhouse she made on that terrible Saturday. "I believe creativity brings communities together. When Officer Kesler destroyed our project, he thought he was upholding standards, but he actually showed us that change is urgently needed." She raised the birdhouse in the air. "This was something that should have been thrown away, but I kept it to remind us what we are fighting for." Today, it joins 49 other birdhouses made by families from every neighborhood in Stone Ridge. Together, they prove that this park belongs to everyone. Jade walked to the central sycamore tree and hung the birdhouse on a branch, the first of the community installations. Then families stepped forward one by one to hang their contributions. Children played in the new playground while parents chatted on benches. The diversity was striking and intentional. Jade had specifically chosen families from neighborhoods that felt unwelcome at Veterans Green. Now they proudly claimed this space as their own. At the end of the ceremony, Marcus made a brief statement about department reforms. "We've implemented sweeping changes in 9 months. Body camera compliance is at 100%. Civil complaints are up. which is a good thing because it means people trust the system to hold officers accountable, and there have been 0 incidents of harassment in public parks. He looked out at the gathered crowd. Change is possible when communities demand it and institutions choose accountability over self-preservation. Stone Ridge chose accountability, and we are better for it. The official ceremony ended, but the celebration continued. Families spread blankets on the grass. Children painted additional birdhouses at the art stations Jade had set up. Food trucks served dishes from various cuisines: soul food, tacos, Vietnamese banh mi, Mediterranean falafel, and more. Jade mingled with the crowd, greeting families she had met during the trial and thanking people for stepping forward courageously. She found herself near the art station where children were making birdhouses under the supervision of parent volunteers. A dark-skinned, bright-eyed girl around 8 years old was carefully painting a pattern while her mother watched. "That's beautiful," said Jade. The girl's face lit up. "I'm making this for the sparrows. My teacher said sparrows need a safe place. Your teacher is right. And this park is now a safe place for everyone, people and sparrows." Later that afternoon, a white-throated sparrow landed on one of the new birdhouses, the original one Jade had hung on the sycamore tree. The bird tilted its head, examined the entrance, and then hopped inside. Mrs. Wheezy laughed as she sat on the bench. "Look at that. Nature's approval." Jade sat down beside her and watched the park come to life. "Thank you for witnessing it for 40 years, for never giving up, even when no one listened." "Thank you for being worth listening to," replied Mrs. Wheezy. She pulled out a new notebook, the first time since closing her last one after the trial. Time to record joy instead of injustice. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and amber, Marcus joined them. "This is what I hoped for when I became chief, for the community and the police to work together, not against each other. It took a crisis to get us here," said Jade. "That's often how the most meaningful changes happen. The real question is whether we can sustain this progress once the crisis is over." Sitting in comfortable silence, they watched families enjoying the park as solar-powered lights began to glow along the paths. This was another improvement of the renovation, providing security without creating the harsh institutional feel of traditional lighting. A group of young people approached hesitantly. Among them were a few who said they had been harassed by Kesler while playing basketball. "Chief Carter, we want to thank you for really listening to us, for really making a difference." Marcus stood up and shook hands with each of them. "Thank you for having the courage to speak up. Change only happens when people demand it." As the young people were leaving, Jade saw something she hadn't expected. Several Stone Ridge police officers in uniform were walking around the park on routine patrol. However, unlike the aggressive attitude Kesler had brought, these officers were stopping to chat with families, admiring the children's artwork, and communicating warmly with the community. A young black female officer who had joined the police force after the reforms approached Marcus. "Chief, I wanted to let you know that everything is peaceful here. There's a great turnout for the opening ceremony." "Thanks, Officer Williams. Enjoy the rest of your shift." Jade smiled as Williams walked away. 9 months ago, seeing police in this park would scare people away. Now they're part of the community. That's our goal. The police should be partners with the community, not an occupying force. The celebration lasted into the early evening. As families began to gather, Jade took one last walk around the park, touched each birdhouse, read the names painted on their bases, and internalized the transformation. This area had been a battlefield. Then it became a symbol of injustice. Now, slowly, though not perfectly, it was truly healing. She stopped in front of the sycamore tree in the center. There, hanging from it, was the birdhouse she had made, where the white-throated sparrow could still be seen inside. The bird's soft chirping mingled with the children's laughter, the parents' conversations, and the gentle rustle of leaves in the evening breeze. "Thank you," he whispered to the tree, the park, and the community that had fought alongside him. Marcus came up beside him. "Ready to go home? Just a minute. I just want to remember this moment." The moment justice turned into healing. The moment fear turned into joy. As the last families left, the lights glowed softly, and the birdhouses outlined their silhouettes against the darkening sky as they stood together. Veterans Green now belonged to everyone. Officially, legally, emotionally, Officer Brent Kesler was serving the first year of his 15-year sentence in a federal prison 3 states away. Prosecutor Sandra Mendoza was serving the first year of her 10-year sentence in a women's prison. Union Representative Frank Pike had been forced to resign after investigations revealed that they had protected abusive officers. Stone Ridge, meanwhile, had become a model for police reform and departments across the country. But more important than any policy change or prison sentence, this park, filled with painted birdhouses and families of all backgrounds, proved that communities could reclaim spaces poisoned by hatred. As Jade and Marcus walked toward the parking lot, Mrs. Wheezy called out from her bench. "Same time next week, I'll bring fresh lemonade." "We'll be here," Jade promised. "With more paint," Marcus added, because the work was never truly done. Reform required constant attention, vigilance, and renewed commitment, but tonight, as the sparrows settled into their new homes and the solar-powered lights cast a soft glow over Veterans Green, Jade began to believe that lasting change was possible. One art project at a time, one birdhouse at a time, one community member at a time. Until every public space truly belonged to everyone, badges meant protection rather than threat, and children of every color could draw and play without fear. The white-throated sparrow's evening song echoed through the park, a melody of hard-won and carefully guarded peace. Justice had come to Veterans Green, and with it, hope.